Socrates said, "An unexamined life is not worth living." Ramana Maharishi said, "Inquire, who am I?" Nisargadatta Maharaj says, "Thou art that." These are some of the stalwarts of the path of Gyan Yoga. Gyan's literal meaning is knowledge or wisdom, and Gyan Yoga is the path of knowledge. It is a journey of self-discovery. The mind inquires into its own nature and slowly creates an understanding which helps us to be at peace with ourselves. Karma Yoga is action. All the learning happens automatically. While playing the game of life, we learn through trial and error. Some of us don't need to think or put into words what we have learned. In Gyan Yoga, one first tries to understand, and the action flows out of active conclusions of contemplation. One pays attention to self-understanding, and action is the side effect. Gyan Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti, Raja Yoga, these are broad categorizations. Everybody's path is unique. As many people, that many paths. But of course, we're all humans. Even though at a micro level, each person needs to walk an unique journey, when we look at it at a macro way, there can only be that many paths. I find the Karma, Gyan, Bhakti, Raja classification quite apt. However, at an individual level, very few people's path will completely fit into one category. It's bound to be a mix. Gyan Yoga is a journey of evolution through creation of self-understanding. Now, there are many misconceptions inside our head, and those misunderstandings can ruin our state of mind. But to find them, we first have to become aware that there are concepts through which we operate. And for that, we first need to understand that we are not our thoughts. I think has nothing to do with I am. Our thoughts are an accumulation and presentation of information. They are an integral or perhaps the most important part of our ability to function sanely and intelligently in this world, but they are not us. Say if we don't have hands, that is a big handicap and will greatly affect us. But we are not just our hands and we are not just our thoughts. Once we are willing to accept the idea that our identity is separate from our thoughts, it is easier to observe the idiosyncrasies and fallacies of our thought structure. As we observe the pitfalls, as our self-understanding improves, we can guide ourselves to a more happy or peaceful state. And this is Gyan Yoga. Understanding itself is a set of thoughts. All the other thoughts get influenced by this particular set. For example, we may observe and realize that we are thinking excessively, and gradually we start pausing the internal repetition. That we are thinking too much is also a thought, but it eats up the other thoughts, like the ancient symbol of a snake eating itself. Understanding ultimately is utilitarian. It is a doorway beyond the merry-go-round of thought, towards mystery, towards our being, towards peace and happiness. Now, all of this is my understanding, my knowledge, or my Gyan. It might be helpful for you, or it may be utter nonsense for you. Everything can be looked at from different angles. My understanding contains traces of my experiences. The choice and juxtaposition of ideas in my understanding might have helped me, but may not help you. Where you are coming from, who you are, your culture, the past that you have experienced and lived until now, influence the choice of words and how your reasoning flows. Where you start your thoughts The inceptive idea itself will influence the chain of following thoughts. Content is a function of subjective context. Our thoughts and our wisdom is a function of our subjectivity. In fact, reality itself is a subjective experience. If we don't have eyes, colors don't exist. Our eyes play as much of a role in creating green as the object which is green. Without the subject, the object doesn't exist. And this is why sages in India called reality an illusion or Maya. There can be no one understanding, no ultimate truth, because truth itself is a subjective phenomena. The wisdom you adhere to, the Gyan you discover, has to come from within you and address your situation. A lot of popular maxims may sound very nice and might be true for someone, but if it doesn't work for you, what is the use of it? Superimposing other people's ideas may not work. The understanding has to come from your own contemplation. Of course, others can help. We all stand on the shoulders of giants, but blindly copy pasting simply won't do. Again, but obviously, there will be like minded school of thoughts one will be attracted towards and can learn a lot from. There are many different traditions and different techniques of self-questioning and contemplation. The structure of these techniques can be quite helpful for some and quite stifling for others. Some traditional forms of self-inquiry can be done with eyes closed, sitting in a lotus position with a hand mudra, or it can be done with a glass of beer. It doesn't matter. Some great sage preferred certain postures. Culturally, psychosomatically, it suited him. It might suit you. But this is not the prerequisite by any means. Each tradition will have a set of external structures and jargons, and if you are a type of a person who requires external discipline, a formal structure, and prefers a certain cultural setup, is attracted towards a certain lineage, it is more than fine. But maybe you're a type of a person who prefers to sit in a cafe, sipping coffee while trying to ponder over your internal dynamics. That is as good as sitting in a monastery. In the end, I would like to share an old story I love. In ancient Greece, some people went to the Oracle of Delphi and asked her, who is the most intelligent person alive? She said, Socrates. So they go to Socrates and tell him, this is what the oracle said about him. He tells them that all he has understood, all he knows, is that he knows nothing. Stumped, they go back to the oracle and ask her, how can Socrates be the most intelligent man when he says he knows nothing? And the oracle proclaims that is why. That is why he is the most intelligent man. He knows nothing. I believe this insight is one of the greatest peaks of Gyan Yoga. This realization is very different than the ignorance of a man who has never examined his life. And it is not that Socrates didn't know anything, that is absurd. But him admitting that he knows nothing and wearing it on his sleeve shows that he understands the mystique of life. He's not egoistic to believe he knows it all. And as Oscar Wilde says, not young enough to know everything. He's at the peak of maturity, at the peak of wisdom, where he knows the limitation of human thought. More one understands, the more apparent the mystique of life becomes. And either in acceptance of the incomprehensibility of it all, or in awe of the mystique, the thoughts dissolve. And what remains? If we ask what remains, then we haven't yet understood the merry-go-round of thoughts.